September 2nd, 2020, public meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission. And I will start off by reading this notice. The meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operations during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/PC and on FCC TV, which is Channel 11 on Cox, Channel 2 on RCN, and Channel 35 on Verizon. Public comments will be accepted electronically until the end of the public hearing. Please submit comments via email to plan@fallschurchva.gov. Also, a quick reminder to my fellow commissioners, please make sure you have muted yourself unless you plan to speak. This will help us avoid technical problems with echo and make it easier for everyone to hear whoever is speaking. With that out of the way, Ms. Bazemore, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Rankin?
I am here.
Mr. Cosner?
I'm here.
Ms. Keats?
I'm here.
Mr. Fuentes?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
All right. Thank you for that. Now I just need a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
I second.
Ooh, all right. I got a motion from Ms. Weiss, and I think Ms. Teets got the second in there. So quick vote, please, Ms. Bazemore.
Chair Rankin?
Yes.
Mr. Cosner?
Yes.
Ms. Keats?
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. On to the agenda. We have item number 4, receipt of petitions for items not on the agenda. I'm going to assume we don't have any, but I want to confirm. No? All righty. We do not have a speaker series this week, but I think we do in a couple weeks, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. On to item number 6A, the August 19th minutes. We need to review those and amend if necessary and approve. Anyone have any comments about the minute? Mr. Stevens, you're unmuted. Go.
I don't have any.
Oh. All right. Does anyone else have any edits to the minutes? And if not, could use a motion to accept the minute as written.
We will be through the minutes of August 14th.
All right. We got a motion from Mr. Puentes. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Weiss. I guess another quick vote, please, Ms. Bazemore.
Yes. Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Mr. Cosner?
Yes.
Ms. Keats?
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
All righty. With that out of the way, we're on to item 6B, which is the West End Small Area Plan public hearing and action. We talked about this a lot recently and got some updates. I assume someone's taking this away. Is this you, Ms. Schaefer?
Yes, it's me. So before the commission tonight is the West End Small Area Plan, and the request is to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council on the draft West End Small Area Plan. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the draft plan and then make a recommendation that Council also adopt the plan. Updates to the small area plan since the August 19th, 2020 Planning Commission work session are summarized beginning in line 9. Overall, I think we had a very positive work session with the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago. Somewhat minimal changes that needed to be made to the draft based on the comments that we got back from the commissioners. So just quickly highlighting some of the major changes from that work session. First, on page 3-13, language has been added to clarify that until such time as a new process is in place for larger mixed-use redevelopment, that the regular special exception process would remain as the tool for redevelopment within the POA number 7, the West End POA, and POA number 4, the Gordon Road Triangle POA. A new strategy has also been added on this page to recommend a review and discussion of the pros and cons of the SEE-SESP process, and that would provide the opportunity for the city to take a deeper look into that process and see what elements may or may not be useful for a new process in the future. The issue of connectivity between the Federal Realty property and the West Falls Church Economic Development Project site was also discussed during the work session. Connectivity, of course, is critical between these sites as well as to the rest of the city. And so a strategy has been added on page 5-3, which states that to the extent that aligning the Falls Plaza entry across Haycock Road to the West Falls project creates orphaned land along the back of the Federal Realty property, that area would be encouraged to be used for open space, and then density could be shifted elsewhere on their site. In addition to changes that were made to the plan from comments made during the work session, a few other changes have been made to the plan. These are summarized beginning in lines 15 of the staff report. Overall, somewhat minor changes, but just want to highlight the major ones. One is for the Haycock Road cross-section. The cross-section has been revised to create a two-way bike lane, and that would be on the east side of Haycock Road. And a note has also been added that to the extent practicable, that it would be encouraged to reduce the number of travel lanes on Haycock Road to further narrow the roadway. Perhaps a road diet or flexible on-street parking during non-peak travel periods could be appropriate in this area, but of course this would require further study and discussion of that concept outside of the small area plan process. And then finally, on page beginning on page 6-12 of the small area plan, there was a section added about Haycock Road, which notes the need to reevaluate that roadway design and travel speeds in order to balance the safety needs of all users. Again, going back to the vision that the city would like to see this area be an area that promotes all modes of travel, but specifically looking to make it a pedestrian and bike-friendly space. And so that's all I have in terms of the staff report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that commissioners have.
All right, thank you for that update. Looks like some good changes were made. I will go around the horn to see what comments people have, and I'm going to start with Mr. Puentes because he's already unmuted. If you haven't.
Thank you. Mr. Staff, I don't have any major comments about today. I think the addition of the trigger to review the SESP is.
Rob, it's awfully hard to hear you. I'm not sure if there's a problem with your mic.
Sorry.
Okay.
Better?
It's still pretty tough. I'm not sure what's going on.
Back to me a second. I gotta switch my. Come back to me in a second. I'll just switch my.
All right, will do. Let me jump down to Mr. Stevens. Thoughts from you on the updates to the plan?
I don't really have any specific comments on wording or whatever. Just kind of a suggestion to staff outside of the small area plan, and that as we, or as staff rather, puts together the review process for the modified zoning entitlement process for the larger sites, that perhaps we should discuss that first in a work session with the Planning Commission before it goes into a document. Kind of looking back on the experience here with this small area plan, I think if we had taken up the issue of the SEE, SESP, and maybe a few other things like data centers and so forth, and kind of reviewed those in a work session. It might have made for a slightly smoother process, but that, like I say, is outside of the comment on the document as it stands now. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you for that. I think that's a decent suggestion. Let's go to Ms. Teets for any comments.
I want to thank the staff for making all the changes, and it looks like, I mean, you went through all their comments really well, and I appreciate it. I guess I'm left with just one last confusing thing for me, and it was something we talked about before. So, you know, on 310, we talk about the B2 Central Business District, and we talk about the change that was made to allow for a special revitalization district. And then I mentioned that on 312, I thought it was confusing. No, it wasn't 312, sorry. On 314, the map on 314, where we have the B2 Central, where the revitalization zone is, and then we have the B2 in front of where the Giant is along Broad Street, and that I was concerned that people would think that that section in front of the Giant, the Federal Realty property, would automatically be a special revitalization zone. So I see now you guys like went and outlined it in blue and talked about potential change, but you don't really say what it is. And I guess what I would just suggest, if you're going to if we're going to mark it differently that way, then maybe mention a potential change in zoning to allow for a revitalization zone or something like that. Or the other side of it maybe is on 310, where you talk about B2, you know, we just talk about doing the special exception and the revitalization zone. We don't talk about what B2 is presently. So maybe it would be good to say that B2 allows for this, this, and this, but in August we made this additional change to the code that allows some flexibility if you, if you get established as a special revitalization district. Because it's just that I think the confusing thing to me is when you read through the text on 310 and 311, it just suggests that you automatically get the SEE, SESP process with a special revitalization district if you're doing B2. So I think there just needs to be something, just a sentence in front of that says that typically B2 is this, but now there's this additional flexibility. That's my only comment. And it's not because I have a problem with it or anything like that. I just think it just, the way it's written and the way the map suggests it with the way the B2 color is, and I think Federal Realty in their letter kind of suggested it, it seems like people think you're automatically get to be part of the revitalization district if you're B2. So that's my only comment. I just think it needs clarification still. But other than that, I'm happy with where we are, and I really appreciate all the work staff has done.
Just to, I guess, clarify, what the area that's outlined in blue is just to highlight that this area is an area that would be changed. So we were showing the part of that site that fronts along Haycock Road and the part that fronts along West Broad Street as being proposed to be changed to B2, because that would allow those areas to have higher heights. But that boundary doesn't necessarily mean that has the revitalization district. It's just meant to show a potential change.
And I thought that's what that wasn't confusing to me, but I'm just concerned about other people looking at it and thinking that, if it's rezoned as B2, you automatically get to be part of the revitalization. I don't think we're saying that, right? There still exists a normal B2 situation. And we will decide if something becomes a revitalization zone. We're not automatically going to give it to someone in B2, correct?
No, so this plan isn't proposing to extend that revitalization zone.
Well, I think that, and I think that's the problem. I'm not worried about the map so much, but I think on 310, where you just talk about the, it just goes right into the amendment that was made in 2018. It doesn't suggest that there is a regular B2 zoning available as well. So I just, that's the only thing I think, because if you look at B1, it talks about B1's limited business, allows this and this, and I think it would be helpful to have a sentence on 310 at the beginning that says the B2 zoning district allows for this, this, and this, but in August 28th, we added some flexibility in this situation. That's all I'm saying. I think it's just because we don't talk about what B2 is without the revitalization and special exception, it just suggests that it doesn't exist anymore, that this is the only kind of B2 we have. And I don't think that's what we want people to think.
Sure, yeah, I see what you're talking now. So we can add a sentence to that paragraph that talks about how that zoning text amendment only applies to areas within that revitalization district.
Right, and I think, and I still would add a sentence of what B2 is if it's not part of that. What is it?
Sure.
Just like we have it for B1. That's all I'm saying.
All right, that sounds like a good tweak if staff's able to do that. Any other comments, Melissa?
No, I'm good, thanks.
All right, let's go up to Miss Weiss. How about you?
Yeah, I think it looks great. I think staff has done a great job. My only comments related to the implementation plan at the very end of the document, and the broad comment is just to make sure, just to have staff make sure that the implementation plan reflects all the changes that have been made. Two things that I wasn't, that I thought might be included in that implementation plan that I didn't specifically see were, one, having sort of the specific review of the SEE, SESP process to understand how it should be modified, revised, scrapped altogether. And the other piece that I was thinking about, just because the Storage Center public-private partnership has obviously caught my eye, I've mentioned it a couple of times, is that we should think about an RFP process for a public-private partnership there. So big picture is just to make sure that that the implementation plan is up to date.
All right, I think that's a good point. Does staff have any thoughts on that right now, or?
Yeah, so we had chatted about those changes, and we can add those in. And I did review the plan today, and I didn't see anything else that was missing from the implementation plan. I mean, generally, a lot of the strategies talked about and recommendations that are talked about throughout the plan are more general strategies as we're looking at proposed projects. So those wouldn't go into the implementation plan itself.
Okay, sorry. And I guess the other question I had in our email exchange earlier today was whether the amendments to reflect the Haycock Road changes are adequately integrated into the implementation plan.
Yes, and so we can add that in as well. The point about West Broad Street and Haycock Road, ensuring that those roadways are looked at for possible speed reductions and roadway redesign in order to ensure safety.
Sense.
All right. Anything else, Ms. Weiss?
No, that's it.
All right. I'm going to see if Mr. Puentes has got his microphone sorted out.
Is that better?
A little better. At least I heard you say, is that better?
Not much better.
Give it a shot. I think we can make it work.
I'll keep my comments. I don't have any comments, but I'll just. I appreciated the piece on the roadway design, and that's in there. I think that the trigger for reviewing the SE and the SESP is a welcome addition. I just want to say I appreciate it. I'm glad the staff highlighted the edits in blue from addition to addition. It's very helpful to go through the document. It's a great job all around.
All right. Thank you for that. I have a barking dog here. Hopefully he'll quiet down. Mr. Krasner, thoughts from you?
Not too much more to add. I'll let what the other folks said. I think whatever remaining comments that were hanging out there, I think people have picked up on that. I mean, for me, the things I brought up last week or 2 weeks ago rather have been addressed by the changes that staff highlighted, and that are in there now. So I have nothing further. I think the plan's in a good spot.
All right. Thanks for that. I think everyone has had a chance to comment, but if anyone has any follow-up comments, just chime in. I think it's evolved well. Sorry about the barking dog. And I don't have any particular comments. This is sort of just a random note. This is a good example where most of our packet for this item was like repeat stuff from the last time we saw it. And if there was any way to, I don't know, it'd be cool if we had some improved system down the road where we could indicate, hey, these are all identical to the last time we had the packet. I understand why it's important to have all the stuff together, but sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out what's new. But, all right. With that, I think the goal here today is to have a motion and get this approved. We did have a couple of tweaks. I don't know how we feel about calling out those specific tweaks in the motion, or if we're confident that staff has those sorted out.
If I could, Mr. Chair, this is advertised as a public hearing, so it would be good just to confirm whether any comments were received during this time.
Yes, I'm sure our viewership is high, but I guess, Ms. Bazemore, do you staff the email box? Did we get any public comment during our exciting discussion?
I see none.
Bummer. Okay. Well, thanks for that reminder, Mr. Stoddard. Ms. Schaefer, you feel like you've captured the minor tweaks that were talked about tonight?
Yes, I think so. And I mean, I'll go back and watch the video, of course. So if Planning Commission feels comfortable with it, I'm sure I can get all the edits in.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion? We have a draft motion.
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is Ms. Teets. So, everyone's ready for the motion? Okay. Whereas the draft West End Small Area Plan establishes a vision for the West End to become a live, work, play, learn community, a vibrant destination that serves as a critical gateway into the City of Falls Church, and whereas the draft plan calls for the use of high-quality urban design, and whereas the draft plan encourages the use of innovative development and building management to improve environmental quality and limit increases in automobile travel, and whereas the draft plan identifies specific short-term and long-term actions that can be taken to help realize the plan's vision for the area, and whereas the concepts in the draft plan are meant to be conceptual framework for redevelopment and public improvements to provide a starting point for public and private investment into general improvements to the area, and do not constitute changes to the city's comprehensive plan, future land use map, zoning ordinance, or zoning map. Now, therefore, I move that the Planning Commission of the City of Falls Church hereby endorses the West End Small Area Plan and recommends Council adopt the plan as a guiding document in decision-making for the planning, zoning, and development review, capital improvements, city regulations and policies, and that it be referenced in the city's comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Anyone want to second the motion?
I'll second.
All right. I think that was Mr. Sorry, who got the second, Mr. Fuentes?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I wasn't paying attention carefully enough. All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any final thoughts or comments about this before we take it to a vote? Seeing none, Ms. Bazemore, could you call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Rankin?
Yeah.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Got that one taken care of. I think that brings us to item 7 on our agenda. The first one being Planning Commissioner reports.
If I could interject, Mr. Chair, I just want to say on that last item, what a tremendous effort this has been on the part of staff, and especially Ms. Schaefer's leadership to carry out a small area planning process when the normal public meeting structure was taken down, figuring out the virtual meeting formats, engaging with all the boards and commissions over the months when the government was shut down, it really was a tremendous effort and a great display of leadership on her part. And so I just want to express my thanks to her and the rest of the staff team in bringing this forward.
Well, I must say I agree with that completely. These things always take a long time and get a lot of back and forth and input and feedback, and I thought the transition to pandemic times went pretty smoothly on this. And to get it done is an impressive feat. So good job, everybody. Thank you for that. Anything else, Paul?
No, thank you.
All right. In terms of planning director report or planning commission reports, I know Tim and I were in on an EDC meeting. Tim, did you have any updates from that? I mean, there was a couple things, but
I can share a few thoughts. There was a lot that was covered there, but just let me cover a couple of highlights. A lot of discussion on the Insight project, and it sounds like the City Council will take that up in work session on the 8th of September. A lot of discussion on issues such as parking, on the interim agreement. Even though staff is optimistic, there still is not a finalized interim parking plan that meets all of the stakeholders' needs. So that continues. And let's see what else it looked like the Planning Commission might be invited to that September 8th City Council work session. That was just speculation. And then there's also reference to the Planning Commission on the town hall on October the 7th that may involve us as well. So those were the main things. There were a lot of other discussion on other issues, but unless, Mr. Chair, you've got some additions, those are the main things that I picked up.
yeah, I mean, other than there was a little, I think there was a little commentary that a good problem to have, but between the wrapping up the Founders Row and the stuff at the high school, and if this Insight project comes through, and there's some movement on the site across the street from Founders Row, like the staff is potentially going to be pretty busy with development stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think Paul maybe has an update on what we will be facing on the Insight project. I'm not sure what got sorted out in terms of invites to work sessions and stuff. We could tackle that in the director's report section. But yeah, otherwise, I think you covered all the important things. Any other reports from planning commissioners? Not as many fun meetings to go to these days. Plus, it was August. So. All right. We had a little bit of correspondence. Hopefully, everybody had a chance to look at that. I don't know that it's anything worth discussing tonight. But if anyone has thoughts on the correspondence, let me know. We had a update on the Falls Green development, which I guess was Oakwood and is owned by the Insight folks. So I thought that was an interesting update on how things are going up there. Kind of some pluses and some minuses. All right, moving along. Director's report. We don't have a written report, but
there is a brief written report. There was a study recently released by the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, the NVTA. It's for folks who don't know, it's a regional transportation planning body that also has between $200 and $300 million a year annually to invest in transportation throughout the region. So obviously they want to make sure they're making the best use of those public funds. And so they conducted a study to look at how is the pandemic affecting transportation now, and what are the likely impacts going forward. And I think some of the big findings are that it's very possible that transportation will change permanently. That the idea of the daily commute may go away, increases in telecommuting, reduction in automobile use. And I think the biggest hit in the immediate term has been the reduction in transit ridership. That's been coupled with an increase, I think, in bicycle use. And so obviously this can be seen as a good thing in terms of folks who thinks that, there are too many cars out there. And that's certainly the city's comprehensive plan calls for reducing reliance on automobiles, and people are figuring out a way to do that, which is a good thing. There are some budget concerns that always come along with reduced usage of the transit system. That is a cost that gets passed through to the jurisdictions when fare revenue is low. So that's obviously something we're continuing to look at the staff level. I don't think anyone knows what the future will hold, but certainly this study sort of lends support to the city's efforts to continue pushing for a multimodal transportation system whenever possible, especially with increased funding in pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities that are becoming so important now. The other item I wanted to touch on was actually just looking ahead at the commission's agenda. Some things, Commissioner Stevens, you touched on the upcoming work session next week on September 8th, and the possibility of that being a joint work session of the Planning Commission and the EDA and the Council. It's a lot of groups to pull together in a short time, and I think one of the things we're looking at the staff level is whether it might make sense, instead of a joint session, maybe to have sort of one or maybe two members from each of those groups invited to participate. Of course, all the meetings are recorded and live streamed, so everyone would be available to view it. But just in managing the meeting, it might make sense to have one or two folks. We'll get some clarity on that in the rest of the week. The other thing that was mentioned, the October 7th, sort of a board and commission town hall. This would be for the Broad and Washington project. The idea would be not to try and host a town hall with 10 boards and commissions, not hold a 70-person electronic meeting. I think that's a little unwieldy. But maybe ask each board and commission to send one representative. And again, everyone would be able to see it. But the idea would be to get the same information to all the groups as quickly as possible. And this, of course, is assuming a council referral. But get all the groups this.
Paul, your audio just cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it back?
I think so. Try.
Okay.
Yep.
So hopefully getting everybody the same information at the same time, and then to the extent that it helps, get the group members talking amongst themselves in terms of what are those interests that cut across the traditional board and commission lines and silos. In terms of look ahead, the idea of development review taking up a large portion of the commission's agenda for the rest of the quarter, that's very likely. We'll talk about it in the work plan as well, but you can see it in the draft agenda. September 16th, the site plan amendment and the site plan phase 2 for George Mason High School, a reaffirmation of the Planning Commission's previous vote on the Southgate site plan, a work session on a 2-lot subdivision at the corner of Columbia and North Van Buren. That's the 606 Columbia. And then an update on the CIP. This is the quarterly update that's provided. And then there is room on the agenda at the beginning. This is a speaker series by Jenny Schutz. She's a housing expert, works with Brookings, and she'll be able to come in and speak with she's available to come in and speak with the Planning Commission. October 7th, the virtual town hall with the boards and commissions, and then a Planning Commission work session and discussion on the Broad and Washington application, again, assuming a positive council referral. And then we get into October, the second meeting in October, another speaker series, this one with Tim Beatley and J.D. Brown, introducing the Planning Commission to the Biophilic Cities Network. Had a positive conversation with J.D. Brown. Staff members did. We've reached out to their group about how could the city benefit from being a part of the network, and how could the network benefit from the city's participation. For folks who don't know or aren't familiar with the term biophilic cities, it's the idea of introducing natural concepts of design to improve quality of life, whether that's sort of utilitarian in improving water quality and handling stormwater runoff, or improving air quality, which of course improves health outcomes. But even just public health in general, and providing people everyday access to nature and improving their mental well-being. And then right back into development review on active applications.
It's a lot on the plate. All right, thanks for that update, Mr. Stoddard. I thought that transportation thing was interesting. I mean, I've seen, you know, in the business world, lots of people trying to figure out what the new normal is going to be like, and it seems way too early. I mean, it's hard to know. For example, public transit ridership is down partially because riding on a bus could kill you, which didn't used to be the case. So who knows what will happen when that isn't true. My personal take is I think people are learning that while they like working from home, mostly what they like is not having a long commute. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a movement towards smaller satellite offices located closer to where people live versus big centralized offices. Because I do think people enjoy being able to work face-to-face with other people. But I'm just speculating. We'll have to see. But we should keep it in mind when we're talking to development people looking at the city. Because I think the notion that no one will ever want an office building again is probably a little bit short-sighted.
We are looking at the staff level about coordinating on a panel of economic and real estate experts from the region, and asking them to come in and share their thoughts with the council on what is the outlook for different areas of real estate, different areas of the economy. And hoping to get that scheduled in the next couple months.
And Chairman Rankin, this is Jim Snyder calling. I think there is going to be a big shift in office, and I think you're going to continue to see more working from home or working remotely, at least for a portion of the week. I think one of the things it will mean is that people who are living in apartments are going to be adding more to their local economy within walking distance than where they might have been doing that at their place of work every day. And you see many of these major companies, some of the leading companies in America, who are not going back to the office for quite some time. So it's, I think it's a trend that's been accelerated from what it's been. But I think it's going to be somewhat permanent, and so we may end up having a lot of people living in the new developments actually spending time and money in their local area doing work, but also, socializing with other folks in their immediate smaller circle, if you will. But I think it's a permanent trend. We'll have to see how that goes, but that's one of the things we're going to be talking about in this future panel.
Yeah, no, it'll be very interesting to see. I know I have a 75-person staff, and everyone's been remote since March. And while people have enjoyed the work from home, we definitely see a strong urge to have opportunities to work in person with people again. So somehow evolving so that occurs. But no one is looking forward to the commute. So I think
the other thing is you're going to have fewer people in these office buildings in order to keep people apart from one another. So people who want to be in offices may need to take more space. People who work remotely may take less space. We'll have to see how all that sorts out, but it's definitely having an impact on the office market and will for some time.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they solve the pandemic so we don't have to stay 6 feet apart forever, but yes, that's definitely a challenge. Which is why I currently work all by myself from my 11,000 square foot office here in Falls Church. It's very expensive, very expensive. All right, anything else from the director's report, or should we jump over to our work session item?
Nothing else on the director's report, thank you.
I have a question, actually, and maybe this is part of the work plan, although I think it relates to the agenda. I just want to understand in terms of the insight discussion, just looking at the agenda, if we don't, it looked like October 7th was the opportunity for a work session for the Planning Commission on insight, and then there would be action on the 21st. Is that, am I interpreting the agenda correctly?
I'm looking at it now. So October 7th would be the work session night with the Planning Commission. You're correct that there would be the shared presentation, interaction with the boards and commissions, and then it would be focused on a Planning Commission specific work session all in the same night. So those three things. And then, yes, it does tentatively look like it would be scheduled for you all to make your recommendation at that next meeting, yeah.
So, okay, I didn't understand that initially. So you're saying there's a town hall on the 7th on insight, followed by a Planning Commission work session on insight on the 7th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I was concerned that we would be asked to take action without having had a full Planning Commission work session.
And two things. One, all of this is dependent on council referring this out to us anyway, right? That's not a guarantee.
Correct. Correct. But
I will say that's a pretty fast turnaround to have a work session, basically our first crack at seeing something, and then asked to make a recommendation the next time it comes back to us. But we'll see what they've got. Maybe it'll be straightforward. But I would just say there's probably at least some chance that we would want more than one crack at it.
Yeah, we'll certainly refine the schedule based on council's decisions at their upcoming meetings.
Yeah. All right, that was a good question. Any other questions before we move into the work session?
Yes, this is Tim. I have a question for Paul. Could you repeat the date that Jenny Schutz is supposed to speak with us? I've heard her speak before, Brookings, and she's very good.
Yeah, she's coming to the next meeting. I'm sorry.
2 weeks
the
from
next meeting, September 16th.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Will we have time to ask her questions, or are we going to have to blitz through that to get to all the other things on the agenda?
We had scheduled it before. There were other items on the agenda. That's what we always try to do with the speaker series. The George Mason High School.
Those items would be fast. I mean,
that's what I was jumping into. That the site plan's already had, I think, positive work sessions with Planning Commission. Site plan's already been looked at by the Planning Commission. So those subsequent items could be relatively quick. We always try to budget about 30 minutes in the agenda for the speaker series, about 15 minutes for presentation, and the rest for question and answer. But of course, there's always the opportunity to take that a little longer.
Yeah, Paul, that's a good point, and I maybe mention that to Ms. Schutz that we'll probably have questions. So obviously, we're excited to hear her presentation, but if she presents for 30 minutes, we're going to be sweating bullets when they ask her some questions.
Right. Will do.
Okay. Great. Anything else? All right. Well, that concludes the regular part of the meeting. We are going to go into our work session now, with the one item being looking at our work plan. As we know, the pandemic has disrupted our best laid plans coming into this year, and I think this is where we're going to hear about how we've got a lot of development related things to tackle coming up.
Thank you, Chair Rankin and members of the Commission. So this is intended as an update and staff's best projections in terms of what the next quarter will hold for the Planning Commission's agendas. As was mentioned, obviously the pandemic adjusted some of the work, included as an attachment, but I don't know that we need to pull it up. there was a work plan that was developed earlier in the year, and it included quite a lot of work, not only on housing initiatives, but also on environmental planning, utility planning, and a lot of those things have been postponed until time uncertain. The other thing that's occurred is not only was it a little bit difficult to pull off those tasks, but also we've seen some new work coming in. West Falls Church, of course, was always here, but the Broad and Washington application was relatively new. And there's always the opportunity for additional applications. And so we're trying to make sure that there are sufficient staff resources to handle any development applications that come in. So with that, I think what we might want to do is actually just jump to the attachment, the update. Thank you, Ms. Bazemore. So this is staff's sense of where the Planning Commission agendas are gonna shake out. The top lines here are including work related to West Falls Church and the small area plan. Starting with the West Falls Church 10-acre project, of course, the special exception site plan, that application itself is in for review, needs to be processed and voted on. And then work will continue on that site. There are also several other items related to that, some code adjustments. I'm sorry, if we could stay on that, thank you. The next three lines there, the land transfer, lot line adjustment, subdivision and zoning code adjustments. So this is a pretty complex application. It's one of the bigger ones that the city has seen in its history. And so some of the regulatory tools need to flex a little bit to accommodate the complexities of the project. In terms of code adjustments, things like a vertical subdivision, which the city hasn't previously done. This is, I think, the second project that's trying to work with the amended ordinance regarding parking space dimensions and column placement, and they're looking at that on the scale of a project that's 10 acres in size, and they're having some trouble accommodating that. So they're looking for some relief on a limited number of spaces to allow for building engineering. And then also the SE allowable uses. This was the SEE process lifted the language or borrowed the language from the B2 zoning ordinance that didn't allow some uses like daycares and a few other things that I think are beneficial within this kind of an office walkable environment. And so that's one of the things that's being looked at is can that code be adjusted, not just to expand the list of uses, but to make it clear that council has the authority and the ability to adjust the slate of uses with an application of this type. So all those need to be, of course, prepared and brought forward for public review, public action. And that all needs to happen in concert with reviewing and taking action on the SESP application itself. Other items on the development review schedule that remain in process. Let's see, the high school, it's scheduled for action by the Planning Commission at your upcoming meetings. And then West End Small Area Plan, which you all just took on an action on tonight. Hoping to get that to a council action shortly. Then if we could go to the next page. All right, Broad and Washington, now trying to move through the review and approval process. The applicant has communicated that given the amount of time that they've been involved in the project, they are looking to move through the review process in an expedient manner. As always with these applications, there's a fair bit of negotiation that goes on before it gets referred out to boards and commissions, and they just want to make sure that when they can get it to a fairly satisfactory point, that they can move through the review process and get to some sort of resolution on the application. The next section, housing affordability. looking at possible changes to the tools that the Planning Commission most often sees, things like development applications and what's allowable within zoning, what does the future land use map suggest, and what are the specific pieces that might go into that. I've heard, I guess, from Planning Commission members that this seems to be the item of most interest to the Commission in terms of looking at ways of improving quality of life in the city for everybody. And so what I wanted to do was keep highlighted here in this section the efforts that have been completed to date, and what's the most likely schedule for being able to take up some of these things. Greenway Downs and Cottage housing ordinances, drafts of those were shared earlier in the year. The idea of updating development regulations for single-family zoning districts. You all had a work session on options that could be available. We've got the speaker series scheduled for the next meeting. There was staff from the city's Housing and Human Services Department recently won a grant from VHDA, the Virginia Housing Development Association Authority, and looking at what tweaks could be made to the city's accessory dwelling unit allowances. I think the most likely timing for that is probably in the first quarter of next calendar year. That'll give staff and the Planning Commission an opportunity to move through the active development applications, as well as the holiday seasons, which are always a little difficult for scheduling agendas and work. I will say holidays are a good thing. It just means that some of the agendas look a little further out than they usually do. And then I think, is there another page here? I think it's a short one if there is one. Right, so as I mentioned, the other things that had previously been on the Planning Commission's work plan and updates to the facilities and utilities chapter of the comp plan, work on a transfer of development rights system or ordinance, and even the city's Transportation Land Use Connections grant that had been awarded by the Council of Governments. All of those things have been postponed in large part due to the productivity challenges of everyone working remotely.
Okay, thanks for that update. So I guess the question is, you've laid out this adjusted plan, and what do people think about it? You didn't list on the plan when the pandemic ends, Paul. When does it end?
That's not really on the Planning Commission's work plan to address.
All right. What thoughts do people have about these updates? I just look at the list. First, go, Ms. Weiss. First person.
Okay, sure. One quick question on the SCSP application. So, when the Planning Commission saw it, we didn't see complete voluntary concessions. I think we only saw the SEE voluntary concessions, not the SCSP, and I know the housing plan was not developed yet. So is that likely to come back to us at some point, or no? Are we done because we made our recommendation?
No, I think any amended application would come back to you all. Of course, I can confirm that, but I assume that would be the case.
Okay, because I don't know if it's amended so much as just it wasn't complete when we saw it. That was the first question. The second question on the housing. The housing plan, and I'm looking at it on my screen because we need to see page 2. I think it's great that you've put review single-family development regulations on that. I appreciate that. That is of interest. I think I just want to clarify. I think I heard you say that we had a work session on options, and I would just recharacterize what we did. I think we reviewed the housing plan and had a lot of questions about it, or the housing implementation plan, and had a lot of questions about what the options really are here in Falls Church. So I would say that like a real detailed, meaty discussion of the true options, pros and cons, hasn't happened yet. So I would just like to see that happen at some point in time. I understand that given what's on our plate, staff might just not have time for it, anytime in the near future. So I would like to see a sort of a more thoughtful analysis of what the options are here in Falls Church and the pros and cons, because I still haven't really, I don't feel like I have a good enough handle on it yet. And the speaker series, I think it's great. I'd love to hear more speakers along the lines of Jenny Schutz, and I'm happy to dig around and see who else we can hear from. But I would just encourage, as many speakers on the topic as we can, because I think it's a complex topic and we all have a lot to learn from it, and that might help inform our thinking going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've heard some people talk about potentially trying to do some sort of a joint meeting between us and the Housing Commission, because I know this is also something obviously they're very interested in. And I know from having, reviewed our work plan and after this meeting that the staff is feeling, fairly pinched on just sort of the normal operations of development review and stuff like that. So, but I also know that this is an issue that a lot of people feel strongly about. So I guess, Paul, one question I have is, and I don't know what the funding situation looks like for the city, but if there's some broad support for digging in on these issues more, is it the sort of thing that we could be going to council for and saying, hey, we need to free up some money to hire a consultant to help us with this, because staff time is just not going to be available on a time frame that people are happy with, or what? Do you have any advice on how to make more progress on this in these busy times?
Yeah, I think I think getting the outside speakers in is going to be a helpful way to get the conversation started. I think I think there are a lot of different directions that you could that the community could go in terms of opening up housing options and opportunities. And I think the kinds of questions that are going to come up in terms of how would this change the look of neighborhoods, or would there be a change in community costs, or would there be a change in stormwater regulations, or would there be a change in parking requirements? That the same kinds of questions that come up, I think, in development applications are probably going to come up in any proposed changes to housing regulations. And so I think those are important conversations to have. I think we just want to make sure that we're exploring sort of the areas of change that are most likely to happen. And I think, the speaker series event, a couple work sessions are probably a good way to get a sense of where does the community sort of want to see change happen, and where is it worth really investing effort to explore what would happen. Other communities, Arlington, DC, they're already undertaking some pretty significant efforts and research, and so maybe that's a place to start, is just looking at what other places have already done.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do think that I think one of the things that's different now than maybe before the sort of events of this year is that more and more people are thinking about pushing ourselves and not necessarily saying, hey, let's focus on what we think can be done, but let's also focus on, let's sort of aim higher than that. But at the same time, all this takes resources and time. And so that's where I'm wondering if I agree. I think get a speaker in here, get the ball rolling. Maybe it helps us hone our area of inquiry a little bit better. But if we do continue to get to the point where we're like, no, we want to at least learn more about changes that maybe right now don't seem likely to happen, but we want to investigate those. That's where I'm saying we may have to be pushing for some sort of support from council on paying for that, because I get the sense we don't have the bandwidth necessarily to do that with what we've got right now.
Yeah, I think in the past these development updates have been they've been, I guess, staff intensive. Thinking back to the cottage housing zoning update, just updating the zoning alone was a year-long process. And so dedicating a staff member for a year to a single project is a pretty big investment for the community. I think what the housing staff did in winning that VHDA grant was a pretty big success for the community. So I think, a strategic approach to, this is something that there's interest in, this is something that's had success in other communities. And, to your point, this may mean pushing the conversation here in Falls Church a little bit about, it's not about sort of what will work with the framework that's in place. It's about sort of what will work to make it a better system for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I, we've talked about this. I mean, I'm a strong proponent of being realistic about what needs to happen to achieve the change that people think they want. Because if you're unrealistic, you go down a path and everyone's disappointed in the end. So, I just want to make sure that we're pushing forward on this. I'm excited that our next meeting will have a speaker. That'll be a good opportunity to learn more and see where we can go. And then I guess, I'll continue talking to, I've talked to some people on council and stuff like that. I'll continue talking to people to see about what the kind of big picture appetite is for all this and how we can push forward. Because I'm reluctant to couch everything on like what's likely to happen and what people will be willing to do or how it'll change things. I mean, I think that's the whole point, is that it would have to change things. So.
Well, and I think, there's already been some good work done in the city. I think it was a few years before my time with Falls Church, but I think there was the ZOAC, the Zoning Update Advisory Committee, that looked at, what are some reasonable changes or some worthwhile changes to the zoning ordinance. And, there were suggested changes to the T-zones. And, those could be a pretty good area for the city to allow some sort of lower scale multifamily development by right. That right now, I think the only residential development allowed by right in T-zones is single family, which is one of the things that the T-zone is supposed to transition to. So it might make sense to have a different scale of development in there, whether that's townhouses or stacked flats or some sort of a 3-story condo. There are a lot of options that are out there that could fit the scale of the city. And those changes are, they're easy wording changes to make. I think what makes it difficult is sort of where to start the conversation and how to get it through the sort of review and acceptance process.
Right. Paul, this is Jim Snyder. I was around when the ZOAC report came out, just when I started with the city, and I believe Melissa Teets was as well, and some others, but there were some good suggestions in there of things to focus on. Among the things that were in there was dealing with Greenway Downs, which, we've done a lot of good work on it, but we haven't been able to get it to a hearing. And the T-zones, what seems to be happening in the city is we seem to be unable to approve lower scale appropriate projects that have residential in them that would provide good transitions to single family neighborhoods. And by default, we end up with transitional sites going single family or sitting fallow. And that's just not a good situation. So we've got big projects that people think are too big. We have a hard time getting small projects done. We don't allow townhouses, really. And if you look at other communities, these lower scale residential projects are ones that provide appropriate housing, provide scale that can work with an existing neighborhood. And we just need more options. Our toolkit is really limited, and that's one of the negatives about the city is we haven't empowered ourselves to do some different things with residential. There's a lot that can be done, but we just haven't chosen to do that.
Yeah.
I think we've just laid out some starting discussions that I, for one, would love to have. I think one is revisiting the ZOAC process? What were the results? What were the options? What was the experience? What was the reaction to it? I think maybe that's one discussion. A second discussion is I would love to hear what Arlington is doing, what other nearby jurisdictions are doing. If COG has any resources or advice, I think that would be a good meeting to have. So I would, and I think then there's a joint meeting somewhere in there with the Housing Commission, which I would definitely support. So I'd love to see those discussions happen.
And I would say at the COG level, there have been joint meetings between planning directors and housing directors to begin these conversations. So at the regional level, there are conversations going on about how do we solve the housing problem in the region, and it's a huge problem. This is pre-COVID, and so that's a major theme of the planning and housing groups within the metropolitan region, and each group is trying to do its part. So there's a lot of dialogue and conversation going on in the region among those leaders of planning and housing.
Yeah, and then again, Paul, I think to the extent that we feel pinched to make progress on this with the existing staff, feel free to point that out so that if we can, we can try to get help elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like there's only just so much we can do. I think I agree with Ms. Weiss. This is an important thing. I would want to try to make this happen. I don't think I would say, hey, let's not review fraud in Washington because we're focusing on that. And I don't know if that's the dilemma at hand, but like if don't be afraid to tell us what the trade-offs are for pursuing this, because I would push on where we need to push to get the resources to keep working on it.
I will say the hiring freeze is hurting our department in terms of being able to bring people in and promote people and get the staff resources. Consultants can be good, but really good. There's no substitute for really good staff who do great work. And I think tonight's a good example of the value of hiring the right people and doing good work within staff, and having a commission, frankly, that works very well with staff. This is the sixth small area plan that's been approved unanimously by the Planning Commission here in the city of Falls Church on a staff developed with the community small area plan. It's a pretty great record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say staff is a pretty important part of the formula. That even that VHDA grant, there is a crack team working on that project, but it's waiting for someone inside City Hall that can write staff reports, get signatures, get it on an agenda. That there's always that integral piece of sort of who's the inside person that's actually sort of moving the thing through the review process. And so it is good to have outside resources. I think they can certainly sort of bolster an effort. But ultimately, you need to have a staff member that's available to work on these things and see them through. As Jim mentioned, we are in a hiring freeze, and of course there was an adjustment to the entire city budget. I think as there was an adjustment to everybody's budget as a result of the pandemic, and so one thing that actually has been reduced in the planning staff budget is actually consulting resources. So, and I'll have a report on this for you all when we provide our next quarterly report. I'm expecting it at the next Planning Commission meeting. But I think one of the things you'll see is that aside from our full-time staff and a little bit of temporary help, I think our total other expenditures that are budgeted are $30,000 for the entire year. So it's obviously not a very big budget, but it's the people we've got and a few office supplies.
I mean, I will say as well, if when I first came to the city from Arlington, and there was an interest in doing these small area plans similar to sector plans that had been done in the county, just didn't have the people to do it. And the Planning Commission, John Lawrence and others, did support hiring, additional people to get that work done, because at the time I told people you do not get comprehensive planning done without comprehensive planners. And the additional staff we've been able to add, the high quality people, that's the reason this city is getting so much good work done. It's the staff you've hired, their capability, they're working well together with a commission who works well with them. And that's my feeling, having been at this for almost a decade now. But having the people to do it in staff and an effective commission is extremely valuable, and I think resources at the staff level really count.
Indeed. I missed a small section of that. Skype kicked me out, but I'm back. In addition to what you've laid out here, Paul, I know you had mentioned to me that we're going to get that CIP update and maybe try to think about the CIP a little bit earlier than in past years, so that's going to take a little bit of our time as well.
Yeah, what I'm hoping is that we can work with the commission. So typically staff begins drawing up the CIP in October, November of each calendar year. And in years past, staff has worked to do really some miracle work to get all the CIP priorities funded and show them budgeted on time. And then the presentation comes to the Planning Commission, and again, it's a great product. And I think one thing that may help in that whole process is engaging with the Planning Commission, maybe in that October timeframe, to understand that as staff is pulling together the CIP, with your all's view of where the city needs to be in the future, what are the top handful of priorities that need to be advanced in the CIP? Maybe it's a list of 3 things, maybe it's a list of 5 things. I think what I remember from years past is that the presentation would be to the Planning Commission, and then a question would come up like, well, where are we with LED streetlight transitions? And then staff would say, we can pay for that next year. And so what I'm hoping is that by having this dialogue in October, it means we can get it included in the current CIP instead of waiting a cycle.
Sounds like a good plan. All right. Any other thoughts from anyone about our adjusted work plan?
This is Tim. A couple of things, small things.
Sure.
On the accessory dwelling unit code update item, it would be helpful if we could get just some kind of a summary at some point on what's going on both in Minneapolis and Oregon in terms of the upzoning that's taking place there, to see if there's any relevance to our situation here. And then under the review single-family development regulations item, every time one of the subdivision applications come to us, we kind of gnash our teeth and kind of deal with it as best we can, but we're rarely pleased, I think, with the outcome. I'm just wondering if some kind of review of that, and I acknowledge that that's kind of grabbing the tiger by the tail on that issue, but I think just seeing how we react whenever those come to us, it definitely is an area where we could stand some further review and perhaps modification of how that works.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was included actually in the council's work plan was a look at what would I think the term is a unified development ordinance. So instead of looking at land use planning, zoning, grading plans, stormwater as separate items, what could you get out of looking at those things in one go? Right, the idea of unifying all those reviews. There are already actually allowances within the city zoning ordinance for this kind of work. The residential cluster zoning district allows for that kind of review, but it requires, I think, a 3 or 4 acre minimum in order to even apply for a project. And so there are some tools on the books that, if they were adjusted, could be, I think, fairly easily brought in on these kinds of projects, and it would allow for perhaps a broader review, but also an opportunity to actually expand the kind of housing that's getting built in the city.
One thing I'll mention about unified development, Arlington dealt with this issue years ago and created a cluster ordinance, and then they created a unified residential development ordinance, which will allow as few as 2 units to be designed to fit the space that is available, so that rather than each lot being a certain size, you can save an old house or save a big tree and relocate the houses on the space available, as opposed to fitting them into some geometry that is a result of, lot width, sizes, etc. Now, we may or may not want to do that, but you can go across the city-county line and see projects that have been done that way, including one that our city manager lived in near Westover, where an older house was saved, a large tree was saved, and a modern new house was put up. So basically a 2-lot subdivision that preserved an old house, a large tree, and let one new house be built. That was done under a unified residential ordinance. So the ordinances are out there. You can go see them. It kind of depends on whether you want to create that kind of a tool for the city. They are available, and they're nearby.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Stevens?
Not right now, thanks.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to contribute before we wrap this up? Nope. All right. Sounds like our next meeting should be action-packed and interesting, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so just to clarify, coming out of this conversation, I think what we'll do, as time permits and staff cycles allow, we'll start compiling a refresher on the ZOAC and what they said, some outreach to Arlington, DC, COG, Urban Institute about what's happening in terms of housing in the region, what are other places doing. And then I think sort of stretching out, sort of research a little further, looking at as was mentioned, other places that have already taken action, Oregon and Minneapolis, on their housing regulations.
That sounds great, Paul. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Unless there's something else, I'm going to wrap this up. All right. Thanks, everybody.